I struggled with confidence. I struggled with imposter feelings. I struggled with asserting myself. The biggest thing that I see that impacts someone's confidence is when they aren't clear on what they stand for.
Welcome to Start With a Win, where we unpack leadership, personal growth and development, and how to build a better business. Let's go. Coming to you from Area 15 Ventures and Start With a Win headquarters, it's Adam Contos with Start With a Win. We're sitting down with Kelli Thompson today, an executive coach on a mission to empower women to lead with confidence and clarity. By the way, this works for guys too. As the founder of the Clarity and Confidence Women's Leadership Program and Stevie Award winning coach, Kelli has trained thousands of women to build careers they love. She's also the author of the critically acclaimed book, Closing the Confidence Gap. And her insights have been featured in the Harvard Business Review, Forbes, and more. Get ready to unlock the secrets of leading with purpose and power. Let's increase that confidence today on Start With a Win. Kelli, welcome to Start With a Win.
Great to see you. I'm excited to chat about what we're going to chat about.
Yeah, this is exciting because this is something that I think so many people can benefit from. And you wrote an amazing book about it. So first of all, before we get into that, I know you've coached a whole bunch of people and helped a lot of people improve their careers and lives for that matter. Take us back. What got you to the place that you are at today?
You know, I always like to start this story from the beginning because it comes full circle. So when I was a little girl, the only thing I ever wanted to be growing up was a meteorologist, a TV weather person. Loved the weather. Like as an 8-year-old, I could tell you everything you wanted to know about how clouds and storms form, all this sort of thing. I get to college and I'm in classes. And I'm like, oh, these, calculus and physics classes kind of suck. And not only that, I had this aha that I was like, oh, if I want to be the TV weather person, I'm going to work the 6 and 10 o'clock news every night. Like that had never it occurred to me, but not occurred to me, And as you get to age, you're like, is that how I want to be spending my evenings? And I didn't. So I switched my major to my next favorite topic, which was political science. And, during that process, I actually just got a job at a bank as a fluke because they happened to pay tuition reimbursement from day one, which I needed because I was paying my way through college. And as I stayed in banking, just starting as a teller, I stayed in that industry for a long time. So I, moved to a wealth management department. I was in sales where I made 80 phone calls a day selling credit cards. Well, then I went to sales training and then HR leadership development, recruitment, and then I ran training programs. Went to go work for an HR tech company and ran their HR. And then, these are all very male-dominated industries, by the way. So it wasn't uncommon for me to be one of the only women in the rooms where decisions were made. And then actually I went to go work for another leadership development consultant, author person. And I was traveling quite a bit and I really wanted to get off the road. And she said, if you ever want to go off on your own, I'd be supportive. You can kind of take this shared coaching client that we have. And so I did. And it was really interesting because the first year, and anybody who's ever run a business will get this, I literally just coached anybody who would pay me money. Like, you got money? I will take your money because I suddenly do not have a paycheck coming in every other week, Then COVID hit. And this was the hugest turning point because when COVID hit, all of a sudden now, all my corporate coaching contracts had canceled. Any speaking engagements I did have canceled. And so I lost like 80 to 90% of my income overnight. And so I thought to myself, well, if I'm not making any money, because I'm not, what would I absolutely do for free? And I thought back to all those times in corporate America when I was working in these male-dominated environments where I struggled with confidence. I struggled with imposter feelings. I struggled with asserting myself. And then I found myself as an HR person coaching other women on, hey, it's okay to negotiate and ask for what you needed. Yes, you should apply for this job. You are totally qualified. And I was like, I could talk about that stuff all day long because I lived it and I helped others with it. So I started just kind of tweaking my content to talk specifically to women about these things. And that's like kind of when everything all kind of started to take off. And I know we'll talk more about that. But it just never falls on, I guess, deaf ears to me that I literally went from wanting to major or have a career in the easiest thing there is to talk about, which is the weather. And now I have a career many times talking about the hardest thing there is to talk about, which is money, advocating for money, speaking up, advocating for yourself and having confidence. And so things kind of sometimes come full circle in really, really strange ways.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it's truly amazing. And you're right. I think we all grow up wanting to be some sort of a newscaster and stand up there. It's such a cool thing to look at, but you're right. Not the best lifestyle, if you ask me. But I love how you got into this confidence gap situation. And you're right. It is 100% an issue, particularly with women in business. I'm not trying to be sexist or anything, but yeah, we've got some very strong people that can do amazing things. Let's empower them with the tools necessary to do that. And confidence is a huge part of that. So you wrote the book, Closing the Confidence Gap. And it really tackles this challenge that so many women face in the workplace. What was the aha moment that inspired you to go, wait a sec, I've narrowed this thing down to this key lever that I can fix, that pretty much anybody can overcome with the right tools and coaching and counseling, what have you. What did you do to find that? And tell us a little bit about the outcomes that you're seeing from that.
Yeah, it really builds on my story. And so I remember from the time that I was a little girl, also, I wanted to write a book. I would sit at my parents' computer, hypothetical computer, and, typed out books. And I will never forget even sitting in my boss's office one day, I think it was like around 2008. And I said, I've always wanted to write a book, but I know it will never be a leadership book, and then of course the universe laughs. But you have to remember in 2008, the types of leadership books that were out in the market were The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Execution by Jack Welch, Good to Great by Jim Collins. Okay, so all of these leadership books are written by men. And in fact, if you Google best leadership books, you're going to get a list of probably 100 books to which 90% would be written by men. It was just the way it was. That's just whose voices were in the world. And so I didn't even think about entering into that space, right? It just wasn't even in my purview. So, after I go out on my own, every year I would have this goal to write a book. And wouldn't you know it, that book just never wrote itself by the end of the year. And so it was 2021. And I was sick of my own BS of saying, you know what, I really want to write a book. And this book just hasn't magically written itself. And what I realized was, as I, worked with a book coach, and it kind of came up to me is, when I went off on my own and started my own coaching and leadership practice, one of the things that I started right shortly during the pandemic was I started a women's leadership program, because what I started to recognize when I went off on my own as an entrepreneur, I joined these mastermind groups. And these mastermind groups were typically filled with other women who were also starting businesses. And we were there helping each other. We were getting some light coaching, on, how to do this sort of thing. But the other things that we were talking about is we were talking about doubt, imposter feelings. We were talking about women's unpaid workloads, which means, oh, by the way, we have a job, but we also typically take on the brunt of like cooking, cleaning, getting our people we care for to appointments, those sorts of things. And so a lot of these things were in the way, not only of us being more confident, but being more successful. And I'm like, oh, this conversation is so refreshing. We're not only talking about all of our burdens and our lack of confidence, but just, sometimes just things about being a woman in our life stages and what it's like to like be pregnant and be on maternity leave and those sorts of things. And I remember thinking to myself, this is what I needed in corporate America. I felt so lonely. I felt like I was crazy, like there was something wrong with me, because I just didn't have the conversation to normalize it. And so as I developed this program, I was like, well, I just need to create then the program I wished I had in corporate America. And so that's what I did. It's called the Clarity and Confidence Women's Leadership Program. And it's for corporate women. And it literally is that. It gives them that safe place to not only learn about some of these systemic things, but also work on their confidence and their advocacy and closing the confidence gap. And so as I was thinking about, well, what's my book going to be about? Like, my book coach is like, you're making this too hard. You're just going to write about the things that you're teaching them in the program. And I'm like, oh, of course I am. I mean, it's one of those things sometimes that, I think that we make writing a book or having this aha idea so hard when it was just bringing to life something that I was already doing. I mean, I built my career as a trainer, so that was something I was good at. And I was like, oh, I just need to put this into writing. And interestingly enough, I called it Closing the Confidence Gap before I actually knew there was a study out of Wharton called the Confidence Gap. And it basically says that they gave individuals a standardized test because they also wanted to know, just like me, why does it seem to be that men just have a better job? They do a better job advocating for themselves. So they gave individuals a standardized test. They did not tell them how they did on the test, but based on how folks thought they performed in the test, they were supposed to go advocate to these hypothetical employers on why they'd be a good hire, a good fit, their performance, et cetera. So as we all probably know, we know the men did a little better job advocating for themselves, but the women actually did a little better on the test. So what Wharton said was, well, maybe if we just start telling the women that they did better, then maybe their confidence will follow suit. And I always say, you know what? No, that's just like telling women, hey, you're smarter. Hey, you're more confident. So you should competent. So you should feel more confident. I'm like, no, that's not going to cut it. I'm like, because for women to actually show up and see themselves in the rooms where decisions are made, using healthy self-advocacy, showing up confidently, using, executive presence beyond just the standard that it's, narrow standard it's defined. We need to see more women in the rooms where decisions are made. And so that really kind of fueled then the impetus for my book, is that it's unique and that a lot of books just give you confidence tips, but this is a both and approach. My approach is, for us to really improve confidence for women in the workplace, number one, we need to fix the systems. We need to fix some of the systemic issues that are at play. Sometimes that, women are working in that, ruins their confidence. However, we're not going to change the systems overnight. So let's give women tools so they can thrive inside the systems they're in while also changing it. And so that was really the unique tone for the book. And that's kind of how all of that very short story of a long process of how that all came about.
Hey, it's Adam. Wanted to take a moment just to see if you wouldn't mind liking and subscribing to the show. Also, leave us a review, please. We prefer 5 stars and a little bit of a comment. That keeps the algorithm happy and it introduces it to new subscribers and new listeners. Thanks a lot. You talk about a few things in here that really would never appear to you to be levers in boosting confidence, like boosting peace, potential, and paycheck. Mm-hmm. Take us through what do those things have to do with confidence in order to achieve it?
Also, let's start with peace.
Okay.
Because I think sometimes this is the most foundational thing. We have to have peace is a broad word. I'm going to unpack it for you so you can build your potential and build your paycheck. But one of the number one things that I see, because I experienced it personally, that really impacts someone's confidence is they don't know what they stand for. Right. Like I talk about in the whole first chapter of my book on how I was a really good list checker. And if I just do these things and accomplish all these goals, then I'll be happy and successful. But one of the things I realized is I was just really good at taking well-meaning advice, whether it was meant for me or not, whether it was aligned with my talents and skills or not, whether it was aligned with my values or not. And so I talk about, at the time, I was on the other end of 2 failed relationships, a divorce and then calling off a wedding. I was in a really sticky, not so good job situation. And so I kind of said to myself, I'm like, well, I could blame everybody else, but there's a common denominator in all of this, and that is me. And that sucks to have to realize that. Let's just be honest. And the other thing I realized was like, well, how did I get here? Like when I really thought about what were the choices of how I got here, it was like, I've just been doing what everyone else tells me to do. I've just been in these relationships because they asked me to be there, and I just assumed that maybe everyone else shared the same values. And I remember this is when Hamilton was big, the musical, and there was this meme going around that said, it was Alexander Hamilton said to Aaron Burr, if you don't know what you stand for, what will you fall for? And that was the biggest aha. I'm like, I don't even know what I stand for. And so when we think about building peace, the first place I always start is, what do you stand for? Like, what are your non-negotiables? What are those things that you value so deeply that you are going to use those things to make your decisions? You're going to discern whether well-meaning advice is right for you. You're going to discern whether the people around you are right. Because if the people around you are wrong and you're conforming to what everybody else wants from you, it's not very peaceful if you've ever been there, right? If you're kind of going along to getting along. And that's a huge source of confidence. And that really then informs like how we set boundaries. What we tolerate in relationships. Like I always say, if you don't know what you stand for, what will you settle for? And I was settling for poor relationships, a lack of boundaries, and that was really impacting my peace. And when you aren't clear on what you stand for and what your unique talents are and those unique things that only you can bring to the world, it's really hard for you to advocate for your potential. It's really hard for you to advocate and be clear on, hey, this is why I should be on this project. This is, the value that I bring to my organization. This is the skill or talent that I want to use to advance to the next level. And being clear on those sorts of things and then having the confidence to advocate for them ultimately impacts your paycheck. Because really having that solid grounding of clarity and then the confidence that comes from that helps us advocate for higher salaries. It gives us the confidence to apply for jobs that pay more money. And I always say works the same with organizations. When you have employees who are clear and confident, you're probably going to have more organizational peace because you have people who have better relationships, better boundary setting, better collaboration. You have an organization that will benefit from the potential of people working in their genius zones. And it benefits the company's paycheck too, because if you have people who are more confident, they're probably going to make more sales. They're going to, advocate for more ways to reduce risk or, save money, those sorts of things. And so this isn't just for, the people reading the book, but I think it's really a holistic view that when we really embrace this philosophy, it doesn't just benefit the person, it benefits the organization too.
Awesome. Simply put, there's really nothing stronger than a confident woman leader. I love it. I've had probably 50% of my C-suite as a CEO has been women, and half of our board has been women. So it's amazing what you see in the confidence and the potential within women leadership. Frankly, guys, I think they're a lot more balanced in life than we are. So, hey, let's talk about some of the lessons that you've learned in all of the coaching, because you've coached thousands of women to trust themselves and lead with more confidence. You've learned a lot of lessons, but one of the key lessons that you've learned is what the common confidence blockers are. Mm-hmm. And when we start identifying where our pain points are and what our challenges are, we can identify solutions to get over those. So what are some of the confidence blockers that you've experienced, and what advice do you have for those?
I want to talk about confidence blockers first by pointing out a question you just said. It's also beneficial in a company's paycheck when you have more diversity at the top. Because research shows that organizations with more diversity make more money. And so also, though, is that a big confidence blocker I see is when organizations have a very, what do you want to call it, not diverse leadership team.
Right.
And I experienced that. Like, I remember working in banking, looking up, and everybody had the same profile. And in fact, I had a leader who joked about it. He goes, "You know what's wrong with this place? Everyone looks like me, old, white, and gray." And I laughed. And he goes it ruins innovation and diversity. And honestly, it is a confidence blocker, because at some point women say, well, I can't get any higher here. Maybe I need to look elsewhere. Maybe it's something wrong with me. And you start to doubt and question yourself. You don't see people like you in those rooms. So from a systemic perspective, I would argue that lack of representation can definitely impact confidence. And research has shown it can foster imposter syndrome. Right. But second, from a personal standpoint, I want to revisit something that I just talked about before. The biggest thing that I see that impacts someone's confidence is when they aren't clear on what they stand for. When they are so over rotating into people pleasing that they're just saying yes to everything because they want to keep people happy. And so what happens is they just walk through life with so much resentment. Resentment is usually a clue that you're living or working outside of alignment with your values. And when you're feeling resentful all the time because, I need to say yes to Adam because he asked. And, I want to make sure he's happy and not upset with me. When I'm saying yes to too many things, and so then my plate is totally overwhelmed. When I'm not clear on what I stand for or what my talents are, I may be settling for jobs that aren't right for me because somebody said, hey, you should do this. Or I'm a high performer and they just give it to me. Well, one of the biggest things that causes burnout and a lack of confidence is not burnout from overwork. It's burnout from rust out, which is a type of burnout you get when you are not using your unique talents. Like, it's burnout by boredom. You're so bored. And so sometimes those are the biggest blockers I see, is they're not clear on their values. So they're not articulating what they stand for, saying, giving their best yeses and nos, setting healthy boundaries. They're not saying yes to jobs or roles that align with their, unique talents. And so they question their abilities at work. And so that's oftentimes where I always start with folks, is getting really clear on those things to make sure we're walking through our life with the right yeses and nos, so we feel the way we want to feel and not walking through the world with just a ton of resentment that we just don't know what to do with.
That's amazing. You've seen a lot of this in a lot of people, but you've also seen some major breakthroughs. Can you give us an example of a breakthrough that, maybe it helps our listeners put themselves in somebody else's shoes and say, I can do that because this person did?
Mm-hmm. Some of the biggest breakthroughs are when I see people like maybe 6 months after. Okay. And maybe they've come through a group. Let's just, if they've come through my group program, or even if we worked a little bit one-on-one, they're like, oh my gosh, like, I sleep at night. I've lost 20 pounds. I have so much more time at home with my kids. I love my job so much more. Sometimes this coaching results in a promotion. It results in a raise. And yeah, I do hear that all the time. I advocated for myself and now I'm making $20,000 more a year. I advocated for myself and I finally got that job. But honestly, the transformations that I'm like, yes, this is what it's about, is like, they're sleeping, they're eating well, they have more time with their family. And you know what? They're just happier at work. because they have, they're setting their better boundaries. They know what their skill set is. And I'm saying, yes to these things. And when I go to work, I actually like my job and I'm not coming home feeling obligated that I need to work all night long. And so those are honestly the types of transformations that just really get me going. Cause I'm like, yes, like we should all sleep well and not be 30 pounds overweight, just because it was just stress and lack of self-care and just over obligating themselves, over functioning, those sorts of things.
This is really a key point for me because I believe in order to be a good leader, you have to lead yourself first. Mm-hmm. And it seems like the confidence really helps with that because once you start leading yourself, you can lead others. And until you lead yourself, leading others is you're lying to yourself essentially. Mm-hmm. So, I love this, not just business transformation, but life transformation component. Is that someplace you start with, or is that someplace you end up with when it comes to this review of where do we sit in life?
Mm-hmm. It's both. And I think a lot of people come to me because I'm an executive coach. And so what they think we're going to talk about is like, how to run a staff meeting, right. How to coach a difficult person. And we talk about all those things. We do. But one of the places I start, which I love what you just said, is you cannot develop others to a higher level than you've developed yourself. So really, you can't, if you want to get woo-woo about it, you can't bring other people up to like this higher level of consciousness than you're already, at. And so when we start with some of these things, we are doing defining your values. I use the Enneagram to help people understand what motivates them. We're doing, unique genius assessments. And as these sort of work situations come up, it's not just about, well, here's how you fix it. Like we're spending time really understanding, well, why are you doing that? Why is this happening? Why are you leading the team meeting that way? Why do you keep having conflict with that person? And so when you can start to understand the why and that self-awareness, oh, so this is why also my mother-in-law and I don't get along. This is why I keep saying yes to all of those school obligations for my kids. Like they start to see the red thread that goes through everything. Because I think if you're working with the right coach, you start to realize that all of your drama at work just mirrors itself at home in different ways and vice versa. And so when you can get to the root causes of all those things, everything gets better. And that's the goal.
Totally. That's one of the first things I like to notice as a leader in a business is if people struggle at home, they're going to bring it right to the office. Mm-hmm. There's just no way around that. And anybody who thinks otherwise, who thinks they can put on an office face versus a home face is lying to themselves. We're one person.
Yep. I tried for many years. And looking back now, I was a big fat liar. It was bad.
Well, I'm glad we're all being truthful with ourselves now. Hey, you have been featured in some top publications like Harvard Business Review and Forbes. Give us a piece of thought leadership or advice that you've shared in those that has really resonated.
My number one article that has gained the most traction is my Harvard Business Review article called To Develop Your Team, You Need to Allow Them to Struggle. So not only was one of their most shared articles, but it was also put in their psychological safety best practices book, because here's the crux of it. All too often as leaders, and we do this as parents, is we get in this overwhelm cycle where, we are so overwhelmed, we're so busy and all these sorts of things. And we think we can't delegate. Well, then all of a sudden, everything hits all at once. We delegate out of panic. And we oftentimes delegate when the stakes are too high. And what happens? People make mistakes because that's just what people do. So then we take it back. See, I'm the only one that can do everything around here. And we get stuck in this overwhelm cycle. And so what this article really says is, well, number one, we have to get a little more comfortable with watching people struggle. Like leaders are really uncomfortable and they really struggle to shift from high achiever to strategic leader, because they are uncomfortable watching people not do things the way they would do, do things like a baby deer. I mean, we've all done it, right? You're watching somebody do things for the first time and you're like cringing. You're like, oh, this is so uncomfortable, But the leaders who are strategic and develop strong teams get really comfortable with allowing their teams to struggle. And the way to do that is instead of delegating high stakes tasks where you can't make mistakes, we need to learn to delegate when the stakes are low. And plan for mistakes, hope for mistakes, because if you don't tolerate mistakes, you're going to be found and left with a team who's unwilling to try anything new. And so that article really unpacks some ways that leaders can shift from high achiever to strategic leader, get a little more comfortable with struggle, practice some delegating, and then some coaching along the way. And to this day, I will tell you that is probably still one of the number one things that I'm coaching in sessions, because what they find is and I wrote this in the article, when you're over functioning all the time, you allow everyone else around you to underfunction. And that happens at leadership. And guess where else it happens? It happens at home. It's one of those things that doesn't just stay one place. They start to find all the ways in which they're over functioning at home as well. And they can apply some of these same principles.
I love this. I mean, here's the reality, folks. Don't try and save everybody. You have to empower them to make decisions, and struggling helps them get there. So it's just, we all try to run in and go, I'm a leader and I'm going to save the situation. But the reality is all you're doing is you're hurting your people.
You're robbing them from the valuable development opportunities right in front of them.
Exactly. And we see this in founders, by the way, everybody listening. If you started a business, you're used to making all the decisions in the business and people running in your office or picking up the phone and calling you going, here's what's going on. And you go, do this, click, and you hang up, or they walk out of the office and they never learn how to troubleshoot a situation. All you're doing is you're taking away their power. So,
I call it founder syndrome. I've worked with a few founders.
That's exactly what I call it too.
And so we had one. I was her HR person, and I would have to go around because we would do things, and then she would walk around the office and talk to people, and then she would empathize with them and be like, oh, you don't really need to do that. And her name was Lorraine. I'm like, Lorraine, you got to stop walking around the office, untying all of her shoelaces. And she, it was just funny. But yeah, I've worked with a couple, but y'all, if you got founder syndrome, it's not helping you leave a legacy in your business. And that's all I'll say about that.
Totally. All right. Well, we can find Kelli online at kelliraythompson.com. That's KelliRaeThompson.com. We'll put that in the show notes for everybody. Make sure you reach out to Kelli and check out her book. It's at KelliRaeThompson.com /
or Amazon.
Book. Or Amazon. Yes. Where you get all the rest of your books. So, and check her out also on all the social media channels. She's on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. But Kelli, I have a question for you that I ask all of the leaders on our show, and I'm sure I'm going to love what you come up with on this. How do you start your day with a win?
I always move my body. Always. If I do not move my body, even if it's just for 20 minutes on a walk, I am unfit for human consumption. Even my husband knows this. He no longer argues on vacation. I need to go out just even for my 20-minute walk. Otherwise, I'm just grumpy. I'm annoying. I'm illogical, all of it. I've always been into lifting weights. So I probably lifted weights for at least 15 years, but most recently I do CrossFit every morning. So if you want a specific thing, I start my day with a win by going to CrossFit.
Awesome. I
then
love it.
I feel functional.
There you go. Yeah. I mean, you'll catch me in the gym first thing in the morning. Also, it's, I think one of the key things that turn on your body, that turns on your mind and gets you moving. Everybody, make sure you check out Kelli Thompson. She's the founder of the Clarity and Confidence Women's Leadership Program and also the author of the acclaimed book, Closing the Confidence Gap. Kelli, you are such a gift to the business community. Thank you so much for all that you do. And thank you for being on Start with a Win.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.